Welcome to YGTV and YG One-on-One, written by FlexScripts. I'm your host, Paul M. Neuberger, CEO and founder of the Young Guns Movement. On YG One-on-One, I bring CEOs, business leaders, and more to the set right here at Serendipity Labs to discuss who they are, what they do, and yes, how they got there. YG One-on-One, written by FlexScripts, is just one of 4 shows here on YGTV, our very own proprietary channel designed to help you grow and succeed in your career, business, and life. If you haven't yet, and why not, click the subscribe button below so that you don't miss a single episode of YGTV. If you're on the go, you can also listen to this very episode on the Young Guns podcast. My guest today is Gavin Quinnies, CEO and co-founder of US HealthCenter. Gavin has one heck of an impressive and diverse background in business, packaging, aerospace, entrepreneurship, gotta take a deep breath, and predictive health technology, which is certainly relevant in today's health landscape. Please join me in welcoming Gavin here on YG One-on-One after this very short break. If you're a CEO, listen up. Odds are you're paying too much for your employee benefit pharmacy spend. How do I know? I work with FlexScripts. They're the PBM police, delivering their average client 15 to 20% savings on their pharmacy benefits. Think how much money that is. FlexScripts makes sure your PBM keeps their promises and meets your guarantees. And if they don't, FlexScripts holds them accountable and gets you what you deserve. Stop paying too much for your pharmacy benefits. Get FlexScripts, the PBM police, on your side. Start the conversation today at flexscripts.com. That's flexscripts.com.
For more than 80% of families, today's medical billing practices are confusing. At HPS, our goal is to improve the healthcare experience for the patient by making medical bill payments less stressful. In Wisconsin, that's all made possible by our comprehensive independent healthcare provider network. We simplify billing and lower costs for everyone involved in healthcare and offer various ways for individuals to pay without breaking the bank.
So my guest today is Gavin Quinnies, CEO and co-founder of US HealthCenter. Gavin, wonderful to have you on the show, brother.
Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely.
It's been a while since we sat down and talked.
It has, yeah. A lot of nice small talk in the meantime. One of the things that I wanted to start with is it's very obvious that individuals that spend a few minutes with you can tell right away that you're very passionate about what you do. Where did your passion for health, for technology, where did your passion for this line of work come from?
Well, I probably started like a lot of people do, not knowing exactly where you're going to end up, but I had a pretty good idea in high school. I was on the English track in high school, and so I had this vision of being like a combat journalist. I like that thrill. I'm a pretty avid outdoorsman, and so our high school was doing all the printing for the district. And so I got involved in, like a 4-year shop technology type thing. And one day my dad said, let's go take a little field trip. And my dad was a metal salesman, and eventually he ended up being more entrepreneurial. But every once in a while we'd go look at these franchise options. And there was this little tiny print shop in a northern suburb of Milwaukee. And we walked in there and I was 15, right? And he goes, what do you think? And I said, what do you mean? What are we here for? He goes, well, we're thinking about buying this. And if you know how to run the equipment, maybe you and your mom could do this. Like, okay. So we did. So at the age of 15, I started a little business with my mom, a little neighborhood print shop. It's still going today. That was in 1979. So I got the bug, if you will, of at that time, if you think about the early 80s, is the very first convergence of technology, primarily computer technology, into printing So it's a combination of the computer, obviously the art side of the written word and the graphics. And so I got interested then. I eventually went to Stout, and I realized when I left I was probably going to do something a little bit grander than run a neighborhood print shop. And so I picked up a double major in packaging engineering, not really having any capacity or love for math. Somehow I made it through that. That was very challenging, and ended up getting into aerospace engineering. And that is really when I got into computer integrated manufacturing. We had a paperless factory, a lot of automated guided vehicles and robotics, and got very, very heavily involved in the heavy duty technology. I mean, lasers and things like stereolithography, which we now know is 3D printing. We helped invent this thing called the binary large object, the blob, which is now the hyperlink. So I was really, really lucky with some crazy things like that. My dad ended up transitioning into health side of things, and when I got ultimately into this industry, my dad ended up doing a leveraged buyout of a metals distribution facility. And it had about 30 employees, about $6 million in revenue at the time, but again, it was now another little family thing. And during that time, we were doing things that are pretty far out there now, meaning we were doing on-site biometric screenings. Now, this is 93. We were inviting nurses to come and review the findings or the results. And then if you participated, you would get a lower cost on your health insurance, and we would give you vouchers for your preventive screenings and your provider physician annual physicals and things like that. We ended up self-funding our workers' comp, which then got me really thinking about insurance and how does that work. And so I really got frustrated that on the group health side, we would get quoted just like any competitor, you know, our SIC code, our zip code, our head count, and yet we were managing our risk in a far superior way. And so we ended up, fortunately, with a little tiny company back then called Employers Health, which we now know as Humana, self-funding a small sub-100 group, which even today is very, very unusual. So we're talking about mid-90s, right? We ended up exiting the company. We rolled 13 other companies up. We had grown to 100 million. We did an acquisition in Orlando, Minneapolis, and Chicago. Very successful. We were first paperless factory. But it was all about processes and systems and risk management and understanding the difference between what goes into a problem and what comes out. Beginning with the end in mind is always my favorite approach. So I became very fortunate in meeting my partner, Dr. Raymond Gavery, who was a primary care physician. And he had built, prior to us meeting, a whole group of what we would now call near-site, on-site clinics, shared site employers. So he would find a provider, he'd do the marketing, the contracts with the local providers, and all the real estate side of it, and a provider would have a small clinic, and he had about 16 of those in Northern Illinois. He had exited that, and his vision was to bring the kind of TLC that a direct primary care concierge medicine to the masses and use the internet doing it. So I had obviously had a bunch of skill as a computer integrated manufacturing engineer. Like I said, we did a bunch of technology in my prior businesses. And so we put a model together, and he had started working on a predictive health risk assessment. So if you think about when you walk into a doctor's office, you get a clipboard, you fill out a bunch of health history. That data is what we call in the data science world flat data. It doesn't really do much, you know. It's just a resulting historical record of the past. What we were using it for was to predict the future. So that was the idea back in 2003. That's when the company was founded by Dr. Gavery and myself, and we built, at that time, our flagship product, and one of our flagship products today is what we called it the personal health desktop. It's that long ago. Now it's, of course, the personal health dashboard, and it's an app and all that stuff. But so, you know, I got involved through a real good relationship with my parents. very fortunate to work with my mother and my father, my brothers, and other members of my family. And that was really the launching pad. So when it got to working with, at the time, Dr. Gavin, when I met him, was 60 years old. And so there's no business of an engineer and a physician starting a business. I mean, that's like the reason you don't start a business is because of that pedigree. And we managed to bully through it. And 19 years later, unfortunately, Dr. Gavin passed earlier this year. So that's a challenge for us, but nothing that was, of course, not planned for, not expected. So that's kind of how I got my way into this business, is through entrepreneurial examples and good mentoring from my family, and I think that's how a lot of people get their start.
Well, one of the things that I'm struck by when I listen to your story is that, I mean, this is a very diverse background. I mean, you've got a background in English, you've got a background in engineering, you've got a background in packaging, aerospace, entrepreneurship. I mean, you're like the Swiss Army knife of executives just based upon what you've experienced in the past. I don't know if you could say one is better or worse than the other, but I think, some people take more of a straight line. You know, I like numbers. I was a CPA. I've been around numbers my whole life. You look at you, very well-rounded. You've had exposure to a lot of different things. Do you think one route is better than the other for a future leader? Is it better for a leader of an organization to have more of a diverse, eclectic background like you versus kind of a straight shot, narrow path?
Well, when we started the company 19 years ago, there weren't job descriptions for what we do now. Software developers weren't making apps. That didn't even exist. There wasn't a portal for an employee to look up their history. There wasn't a predictive modeling. The job description for our teammates right now as a health and wellness consultant, sure, there was account managers, but it's a different thing. So I don't know. I guess to answer your question, I think any good leader will take on a challenge and apply their experience and ask for help when they don't know. And so whether a straight line is the right approach or just a diversity, I tend to believe that most people have 3 15-year careers. When I mentor the people that I work with, that's kind of what I say to them. We have, it's actually an official relationship between what we call our teammates. That's a little corny, capital TEAM. Together, each achieves more. Old, team building stuff I taught many years ago. And so our teammates have a respect for each other such that if they want to go do something different, they'll know that I'll help facilitate that. I always use the example, if you want to go become a kindergarten school teacher, let's talk about it. Let's find a way for you to find your path, because you're not going to be on the same path your whole life. And things that are completely out of your own personal control for your career could be things like health that's related to your parents. You might have to move to somewhere to become that provider of assistance, or your children. You don't know what that's going to be like, right? That's a luck of the draw, if you will. So I think you have to kind of find a way to again be flexible. So I don't know if there's a right answer to that. I think you got to find it within yourself, and that's not easy.
Right. Well, one of the things that I really like with respect to leadership, and it kind of is like going back if you're building a house, before you're going to put the roof on, before you're going to put those decorative windows on that your wife really likes, you need a very firm foundation. Without a firm foundation, that entire house is going to come down. And I think the same is true for leadership. Leaders have to stand for something. I think the best leaders make what they stand for pretty well known, and they have that firm foundation of which to build upon. What's Gavin's foundation? What's at the root of all that you do with respect to your leadership?
Well, I feel very firmly that I'm a servant leader, and I am a servant of God. So I have to take the perception, my personal interpretation of what does that mean, into the business world. And for me, that means removing barriers, creating an easier path. If you read our performance appraisal, which we don't call it that, but to position what it is, it's a We call it a employee work-life discussion sheet, okay? There's 8 questions. Every one of them are about, are we doing a good job making you perform well in your job? Do you feel recognized? Do you feel that the barriers associated with your relationships, with your teammates, with your vendors, with the clients you're working with, is that helping you get what you need to get done? And we're a process-driven organization. I have 26 employees. There are no managers. They all report to me, if you want to say it that way. And I won't let anybody call me a boss. I'm a team leader for whatever team I happen to be playing on.
If you don't mind, now, wouldn't that make a lot of managers uncomfortable? I mean, to have 26 different people coming to you, 26 people, how do you get anything done with that many people coming to you on a regular basis?
Well, it's a process. So we have several process-driven organizational management activities. So to be specific, on Monday mornings we have what we call a sprint. It's a peer technology planning, production planning activity. That sprint is actually run by a non-technology person. It's run by what most people call an account manager. Again, we call them health and wellness consultants, and they are the voice of the customer. And in our business, we're very, very different technology shop. We are our own largest customer, meaning what we build that might show up on someone's phone, it might show up on a desktop of a physician, we have to use it to do our job. So that internal customer spin is about 2 to 3 times what most software development organizations do. When I tell people we have 1-week sprints, they don't quite comprehend that. Most of them are 2-3 weeks. We just move because we understand what we're doing. So that process manages our production. I don't have an IT director. There's 5 developers, there's 8 consultants. That runs on its own. And we have what we call a client quality meeting, which is really a staff meeting. And that's where the consultants just kind of talk, this is what's going on. This is a project we're launching. A lot of it is, Gavin, I need to look at this, or we have a thing we have to make a decision on. Let's find a time to talk about that offline. And so it kind of runs itself. And then for the big projects, we have a scope where we're like, oh, we got to invent something. Let's get the appropriate people in, and that's a standing meeting. And then with our clients, when we fire them up, we always have a lead consultant, and we've got kind of a technical liaison. That's not a developer, it's another consultant, but their job is to pay specific attention to just the software side of it. Because if you think about the things that we do, insurance as an example, very different world than maybe deploying a wellness program for an employer. You have different types of compliance. Mm-hmm. So everything works off of a team-based environment, and it's pretty amazing. We don't release bugs hardly. We really don't have a lot of, here's what I like to brag about the most, and I will call it bragging because I'm talking about my team. And I'm just there to kind of help them get their stuff done. We have about 5,000 employer clients, about 150,000 active lives. About 75% of those lives, their paycheck depends upon how they behave with our platform. Meaning if they do something, they could get a health savings account deposit. They might have qualified for some points. They might earn some dollars in the company store, and I could give you 50 different examples of that. And within our population, there's probably 100 different versions of the software, even within a company. So if you had a large company as a headquarters and they've got a gym and a food service on site, and then a distribution center and people working out of their homes, those are all different cultures. So they might have a different campaign or engagement program, or even the way they interface. Might have a doctor in one site, and if you have a retail site, like we're not doing any phlebotomy or blood work or any clinical stuff because it's a store. Don't do that. So all of that is all custom driven. The thing I like to talk about, I use the word brag, is our help desk is only busy 3 hours a day, and that's one person. So what our team does, it works. So we're about 25% clinicians, nurses, some rented physicians in there, about 25% software developers, about 25% health and wellness consultants, and then you've got me, I'm an admin guy, we got a small sales team, and then accounting and so forth.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you referenced in that conversation that we were having is your faith. I know just based on the friendship that we have and the conversations we've had offline that faith is pretty important to you. How do you navigate this? Because I mean, you're told to be your true, authentic self in the workplace. You're told to be your true, authentic self in your interactions with others. But at the same point, it's don't talk too much about your religion. You don't want to offend anybody. How do you navigate that? How do you set the tone for your organization that you are a true, authentic leader, while also potentially bringing in your faith? How have you managed to walk that line in your career?
Well, in these days, it's even more complicated with a lot of the social, let's say, noise out there, okay? And I do believe that there's forces at work that are meant to divide us, and I think one of the dividing lines is faith. So the answer to your question is we're very careful about our teammates. Today we had an interview for a brand new position, something we sort of made up. It's a quasi bridge between a technical person and a consulting person. We are kind of winging it. It's the area of expertise that we need. And we had almost every employee interviewing this person. And then because we got to get the right fit. So, in 19 years, we've never lost a teammate to greener pastures. And that's a testament to choosing the right people to be on the team. We don't do any fancy testing. You and I have friends that do a lot of that, people we've worked with together. We don't do any of that. It's all about, and I definitely look for those things. I make it known that we are an organization that has, you have to be careful, of course, but that we certainly have a certain set of values. We do not speak about the fact that we're a Christian-based organization. That isn't something that we do, but it is evident in the way that the employees work together. It's all about doing the right thing. My dad taught me one thing that I've never, ever let go of it. If you do the right thing will happen. And you may not know it now, and it may not be the easiest choice now, but if you make that right choice, and you do what would Jesus do? You answer that question very simply. He would do the right thing, right? If you do that, it may be hard. It may not even, you might lose a customer or even a relationship over it. And, but ultimately the long run is going to get you there. So I navigate it that way. I'm a pretty cards on the table guy. It's not always, I don't know if I put my best foot forward. It might not be the right foot. It might end up in my mouth sometimes, but that's, I'm pretty straight with people about those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, you talked about navigating uncertain waters. Certainly there's, that is true on the faith side, but I'd be remiss if I'm talking to the CEO and co-founder of US HealthCenter and we're not talking about COVID. I mean, what from your perch, from what you do, from the people you interact with, what are you seeing out there? How is COVID changing the landscape from a predictive perspective, from a US HealthCenter perspective? What is your read on this whole situation now that we've been going through this as long as we have?
Well, there's a loaded ton of questions in there. Let me just position it this way, okay? So the name of the company, US HealthCenter, does not indicate that we're a destination. We certainly run clinics at employer groups. That isn't our business model. It's a service. So we're a technology company that has built, to my knowledge, the only set of algorithms that can predict disease prior to the appearance of symptoms and been certified for it. So Intel and GE created this validation institute and they certified our ability to predict. So what do we predict? Most cancers, there's 75 conditions. Most cancers, what we call the metabolics, so heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, peripheral artery disease, stroke, musculoskeletal, back problems, arthritis, and then mental nervous, stress, anxiety, depression. What's not on there are influenza, Ebola, COVID. So it's a tertiary thing. So you have to think about our business as dealing with it almost like any other business, more than how did U.S. Health do with it? Now I can tell you, and we spoke about this before the show started, as an organization, we had a whole bunch of giant projects that, just for the nature of projects, they were getting delayed and pushed out, and these are products we're building, life insurance products, indemnity products, group self-funding, insurance products. As you know, those things take forever. You have a lot of red tape and politics associated with departments of insurance and so forth. So those were taking a long time. They were 6 months behind, and all of a sudden we hear about this COVID thing. Now, being in the predictive health world, every single weird thing that is a cure for some condition, I generally hear about years ahead of time. I mean, like years. I heard about COVID in June of 2018. So almost a year and a half before it came out. In fact, when I didn't believe it, I heard about it again in July of 2019. They said within a year we'll be wearing masks, and you might have to have a piece of paper to travel.
Well, who's they? Like, who did you hear this information from?
The people that pay attention to, the dark web of politics that's out there. So I can get a little bit off the grid on some of those things. So, from a business owner in our space, we have to keep our people healthy. That includes COVID, so we have to educate them about those things. As you know, there's lots of different points of view out there. We have a lot of clinicians on our team, and sometimes they have differing opinions, and even differing opinions about whether you should get vaccinated or not, and those kind of things. So, like any other business, we have to navigate the water. We have to be as evidence-based as we can, and that's where it gets challenging. Because when you start thinking about the evidence, then you have to ask yourself, what evidence?
Right, and I'm sure this is kind of a general question, but I think one of the things that a lot of these business owners and executives are worried about is, how do I handle this crisis? How do I navigate this? I mean, you got lives, you've got politics, you've got maybe things that you can and cannot do, you've got maybe some kind of liability concerns. So just because you're one of these guys that hears this information, you see a lot, you're a smart man, you kind of put the pieces together. But what advice would you give to a business executive who's trying to best navigate this COVID situation? Is it listen to the CDC? Is it, hey, survey your employees, do what they want you to do? I mean, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who says, gosh, I don't know which way is up and which way is down, help me here?
Well, in our world, we use a tool called synthesis analysis. In the predictive modeling world, it means, as in life, there's never a single true source. So if you're going to make an important decision in your life, you probably will ask more than one attorney, more than one accountant, and gather information from maybe an expert. If it's a real estate deal, that's a different kind of expert. It's a medical deal. And you synthesize that information, you come up with your own opinion and use your experience. And so I think there's a challenge there in the interpretation of what's going on with this particular condition. While the CDC is a source, just like they have information on how to predict heart disease or cancer, which we use in our algorithms, they are a source. So with every decision, there's multiple sources. And I think as an executive, my approach is to listen to the sources, get common agreement amongst the team that have to live with the decision we make, and focus on the large group. We have this thing in population health called the 25-50-25 rule. 25% of the people are not going to do what leadership says. They don't trust them. 25% are going to only do what leadership says because they just trust them. The 50%, we always say sell to the 50%. That's the majority. And try to understand what's going to keep them going where they should be going, whether that's meeting client demand or the mission of the company or whatever. And that would be my recommendation. And don't listen to one source.
Yeah, well, it's good advice because like you said, there's a lot of noise out there. The CDC says one thing, people treat it as gospel. The Republican says one thing, people treat it as gospel. So I think it is good to have that diversity, to have that diversification and get information from multiple sources. One of the things that I kind of want to, as we start wrapping up here, is talk just a little bit about this predictive index that you have, this PredictiMed, because I know that that's how we started our friendship when I was the president of the Star Group, and that was one of the things that really drew me to the organization, is how they had this culture of wellness. They really wanted their employees to live happy, healthy lives. And we would get tested on a regular basis. We would get scores on a regular basis. We would meet with nurses on a regular basis. And for a guy like me who's insanely competitive, if you want me to get into good health, just put numbers around it and set goals for me. That really got a lot out of me. What I was amazed by is when because we were talking about health, because we were scoring it and having conversations about it on a regular basis, we had a very healthy organization as a result. Why should other organizations consider using this predictive model to make their organizations as healthy as possible?
Well, you hit on an important point. People respect what you inspect, right? So if you're checking something in your business, then that's going to be something. So the easiest aspect for any leader is the economics, right? It's the number 2 or 3 largest expense is your employee and the employee health associated with it. And it continues to increase, namely because there is little control. So if you think about a business, you do quality audits, you do safety audits, you do financial audits, you do compliance audits, you do IT audits. Why aren't you auditing the population health? And when you do, using our tool, you're going to find out where your risks are. And the irony is that the vast majority of the risk that resides in the population, just because of the nature of our human genome, tends to be the people that are they're at the company the longest. They're generally leaders. They're the most highly compensated. They're the most loyal, and they're the most valuable. And I don't care if it's a 100,000-man organization with 10 people on the board or a 10-man shop with 2 leaders. It's those couple of people that really are, if they go down, as we say, then you're challenged as an organization. And so it's just, not only is it the right thing to do, it's the right economic thing to do. It is a given certainty that 20% of any population is within a couple years of getting sick. The getting sick could be very disrupting, like ovarian cancer or colon cancer or heart disease, or it could be something people can live with, like hypertension and diabetes. It's our job as leaders to understand what the barriers are to success. And I don't know about you, but if one of my teammates is going to have a catastrophic illness that's going to destroy most of what they live for, I want to know about that. I want to do something to help them. So that's what we do. It's the right thing to do. You and I spoke earlier about challenging times and the economics of what's going on, the uncertainty of the economics today, and it's the right thing to do. So we keep coming back to that. Yeah. And that to me is the reason why a leader should do it. It's the economics are clear, and the impact is significant. I mean, you help a given individual avoid a catastrophic health event, that pays for itself, not only financially, but socio-emotionally 10 times over.
Sure. Well, 60 seconds or less, because we're just about out of time. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways. I don't know if you can see my yellow legal pad, but there's a whole lot of notes on here, so I've been blessed by your insight, to say the least. But one of the biggest takeaways that I have is you've got this team of 24, and you said not a single one has ever left for green pastures. I speak for a lot of executives watching this going, how the heck did you do that? 60 seconds or less, name 1 or 2 things that you've done as an organization that others can potentially emulate to create this culture that people just don't want to leave.
Communication is the root of everything. When you communicate, you get feedback. You say things that people are going to tell you do or don't like. And as a leader, I think you have to communicate and be there and relate. And I mentioned earlier, when we interview people, we use a team-based approach. I do have the trump card. I have the final say. I'm writing the check, so there's been times where I haven't agreed with my team, and we've placed the bet that they wanted, and it's proven out to be a good choice because it's the right individual. It was the right move for the company in general. That time always tells.
Right.
So.
Well, I can tell you one thing that time will tell is that this interview was very worthwhile. I really appreciate your insight. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being truly authentic.
Feel blessed.
And thank you for being truly authentically you. You're doing truly amazing things, and I really appreciate the time. So Gavin Quinnies, CEO and co-founder of US HealthCenter, we really appreciate it today.
Thank you, Paul.
What an intriguing conversation we had with Gavin Quinnies here today at Serendipity Labs on YG One-on-One, written by FlexScripts. Thanks to Gavin for sharing his experience and insight, and boy, that guy's got a big IQ. Speaking of insight, drop us your ideas and suggestions below in the comment box, or go ahead and post on the Young Guns LinkedIn or Facebook pages. Be sure to subscribe to our channel right here on YouTube. We also distribute our shows as podcasts, so go ahead, give us a listen. Thanks again to Gavin Quinnies. What a smart, remarkable man, CEO and co-founder of US HealthCenter, for sitting down with me here today. I'm Paul N. Neuberger. We'll see you next time.